often too, like when we hit the record button, it's kind of like, it's like one of those things. It's like, I don't know. One of my first like lifting podcasts I always got into was Mark Bell's Powercast. And then like, no one ever started like, it's like so weird to like just hit that record button because it's like, you never want to be like, all right, guys, we're hitting this. We're trying to be on point. We're trying to, it's like no one would ever want to listen to that. It's like not a conversation at that point. So we're never. Yeah, go ahead, Roman.
That's so funny that you bring them up because I checked them out for the first time in like the longest time. And Sean was still with them. Stan Efferding was on, and he was talking a little bit about Peter Attia. So it had some like great loop backs to some of the things that we've been talking about on the pod recently.
Yes, awesome. Well, guys, thank you guys for tuning in Gainz Podcast again. We appreciate your time and your support for the Gainz Podcast. We actually have our first international guest on today. So, Steve, you are our first international guest onto the podcast. We've been just keeping it to the States on the United States side of things, but you're actually the first. So, Roman, before you get into like your like introduction, Steve, please, if you can, just do a quick introduction, talk about who you are and what you do right now. And then obviously you don't have to get too deep into it, but we would love to get like a quick intro out of you, buddy.
For sure. Yeah, I appreciate it. And it's an honor to be the first international guest. So this accent will probably sound a little bit, sound foreign, right? Normally the guys from the US like the British accent. So it's like, okay, I've got a little bit of a win there already. So yeah, like you said, I'm Steve Hall. I am the co-owner and the online coach at Revive Stronger, which I don't know if this is backwards or not. I normally try and flip it so that people can read it, but I should say Revive Stronger anyway in the background if people are watching. And so, yeah, we're an online coaching company and I guess like a content producer in some ways. Like I run a podcast as well. It's the Revive Stronger podcast, which has been going on for yonks. Like I haven't missed a week episode after like almost 400 episodes now. So it's been going a heck of a long time. It's kind of crazy to think about. And we mostly coach physique competitors, but also just people who are very kind of invested into their physique progress. So fat loss, muscle gain, all that good stuff. Mostly coaches, in fact. So a lot of the people, well, pretty much everyone we coach is either a personal trainer or an online coach themselves, or that and a physique competitor, which is pretty cool. So people are really clued into this stuff and you can have really dynamic conversations, which is a lot of fun. And yeah, I've been bodybuilding now almost like competitively a decade. Next year will be like a decade since my first show. So 2014, I stood on stage as a novice, and since then competed quite a chunk of times, 3 seasons. So I did 2014, 2017, 2021 was my last season. And yeah, I guess I've been lifting almost 15 years as well. So it's getting on. I'm now like mid 30s. So I started when I was about 15. So I've just embraced it, loved the process. I think you have to once you've kind of been lifting this long, and I guess also doing it naturally. Everything's so slow. You just have to like really embrace that process because it's a little bit like watching paint dry at some point, trying to get these extra gains.
Yeah, I was gonna say real quickly too, Steve. I actually did 2 bodybuilding shows in 2016 when I was 21. So just wanted to throw that out there, and natural myself. So I wanted to, if you didn't say natural, I was going to say that for you because I know a lot of people are going to be like, natural or not natty, and all that conversation and whatnot. But we'd probably get into that a little bit later. But Roman, what did you want to go ahead and start getting into some of your introduction pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been following you, I think, since like 2017, Steve. Your podcast is like top. Yeah, it's like absolutely top notch. You introduced me to people like Dr. Mike, Eric Helms, the 3DMJ team, like so many different great resources. So from like my own lifting journey perspective, you've helped me out like so much from like, from afar. So that's like the super cool thing about the podcasting community. And if anyone in our audience isn't aware of Steve Hall, we'll link all of his stuff in the bio below. But an absolutely phenomenal podcast. It'll help anyone from like your first day in the gym to seasoned competitors, IFBB pro level bodybuilders, that kind of thing. But wanted to connect with you today, Steve, because you have built such like a fantastic platform for bodybuilders. I believe if you haven't competed in powerlifting, you've at least had powerlifters on your podcast before. So I know you can kind of talk to that as well as some like Gen Pop type recommendations, but get your perspectives on coaching, what makes a great coach. So if we could just start off, in your opinion, in your extensive experience, what do you find makes a coach a great coach?
It's a really good question. And just quickly on the note of powerlifting, I did one powerlifting meet and it didn't go super well. And it was too monotonous for me, powerlifting, specifically like the months leading into the meet. So I was like, I need the variety of bodybuilding. So yeah, I haven't kind of dived into that for a while. But in terms of kind of what makes a great coach, I think a lot of people upon listening, especially the audience I tend to talk to, they kind of initially think, I don't know, like being as evidence-based as possible, like knowing the references for why you've given someone a prescription, like this, why this many sets, why this much protein, and kind of being able to recount their names off the top of your head and things like this. And whilst that can be like a great skill to have, it's by no means one of the main and most important things to have. For me, the most important thing for a coach is empathy. So being able to understand people and kind of understand their emotions, why they feel the way they feel, being able to read them socially as well, because those things are just so invaluable, like to understanding individuals and being able to help them as best as possible. If they're communicating to you and I don't know, you just treat them like a robot, like you could give them a prescription that they just absolutely hate, they're never going to adhere to, and you've lost them as a client now, and they're not going to see very good results. So the most important trait I think to have is like that emotional intelligence, that empathy, and then alongside that is an ability to communicate. And it's interesting because I obviously coach online, and so you can really pick your communication channels, and people do. And some people find that they can communicate with clients via email. Others have, like, I don't know, even kind of Skype chats, maybe similar to this. And I found I started with email, and that just too many things got misconstrued, and like you can't read someone's tone, you can't see their facial expressions during it. As a bodybuilder, like nearing the stage, like you can type a pretty comprehensive email, especially if you use Chat GPT now. But speaking that is quite different. And when you see them talking through it, you see the emotion in their face, or they're dead behind the eyes. You kind of know how their diet fatigue is, whether or not you need to kind of change something. You also just understand like if they're joking or if they're like serious with something that they're kind of putting across to you, which I think is just important. So I ended up moving quickly to using kind of video check-ins. So not a live chat like this, but they record themselves as like a video diary and send that across. And that communication is so important. But I think the most like a really important thing is giving the client the ability to communicate to you and giving yourself the ability to communicate to them in the best way that you feel possible. Because again, without that communication channel and clear guidelines to that, so many things just get missed. I know, like I imagine you guys have heard horror stories of like clients who have sent in check-ins even, or just an email, and the response time is like a week. It's like, this is my weekly check-in, and now it's a week. I'm already like, hey, I'm sitting here, especially for ambitious people who want to stay on top of their shit. They want to make sure their nutrition, their training is up to date, especially as a competitor near in the stage. You can't be dealing with someone who's giving you feedback that slowly. So I think a really important trait, especially if you're doing it online, is that kind of punctual communication. So I think empathy, emotional intelligence, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, hugely important skills. You don't know if you're dealing with a dad with like a family and a wife and a busy job, or just a guy that's single and a bachelor and he just has a dog. It's like they're quite different environments to have to kind of adhere to things, and you might have to set things up slightly differently. And then the second part of that and leads into that is that communication and support and just having clear guidelines. So again, if you have a 48-hour response time, like, you know, as a client, if it hasn't come in 24 hours, you can be confident it's still going to come in the next 24, versus just they just like send you an email and like hopefully they'll reply soon. So you know when it's going to come, and that just allows loads of stress to just drop off from both ends. Because again, as a coach, you have, I don't know, a number of clients. You can't be like, people like to say 24/7 for support, but it's like, you're not up in the middle of the night if your client's emailed you to reply. You got to kind of give them some guidelines, because it can be stressful for you too, and there's rarely an emergency that requires that level of support within like fitness. So I think that's important. And then after that, this is when I'd start bringing in the kind of knowledge. This is the educational stuff. So kind of making sure to have, if you need to be qualified for the job that you're doing, kind of getting your personal training qualification. Online coaching, there is no like mandates or anything like that. So it's a pro and a con. I think mostly probably a con because, but it's hard to regulate it anyway. But I mean, you can come in just based off your experience, let alone what qualifications you have, but you better educate yourself. So reading the appropriate textbooks if you're not doing the qualifications, keep you up to date with podcasts, educators, the experts in the field, keeping kind of an eye on the literature, whether or not that's just subscribing to. I mean, there's so many research reviews now, which are just unbelievable resources to have. Like, you have researchers doing the research, then you have like experts within the field digesting that and producing content for you to then be able to read and apply that to your clients, which is just so helpful. And then to the back end of that, I think better coaches have more experience. As a new coach, you can have all these things and no experience, but then you want to work on that experience, and obviously that's just going to come over time. I would say that like some of the best coaches have tons of experience. They've been in the game for a heck of a long time themselves doing the thing, and also like their clients doing it. Because like you probably, I'd imagine you guys would agree with this. You can have like a PhD researcher and he might tell you how to train for hypertrophy, but if he's never been in a gym, I'm kind of don't care too much what he has to say, like a whole lot. Like I do, but the person who's a PhD researcher who has all the knowledge also has client results and also is in the gym themselves in the thick of it. I'm like, hey, nah, you got the practical experience and like your client experience. You've had to work with lots of people and troubleshoot, versus the guy that just has like all the book smarts. So I would say kind of knowledge and experience kind of come hand in hand after that. And like the knowledge is something you can do like on your own and you can keep a breadth of things. And then experience is just something that comes with time. I'd say they're probably like 4 of the biggest kind of traits of what I think is like a good coach.
Yeah, I like how you went into it, because it's like, you know, when I got in the bodybuilding coaching, or not the bodybuilding side of things, it's like, you know, there's just so many people out there that kind of disassociate themselves with like their actual clients and not ever understand them and whatnot. So I love how you're doing that. I love the process, because it's definitely something that's going to be challenging, especially someone that's, you know, driving themselves to have like the best physique as they possibly can on stage at that certain time and period. Because like when I did my first 2 bodybuilding shows, I started my first big corporate job. I moved out of my parents' place. I was 21 years old at the time. And, you know, I get, you know, if you don't have those conversations with like the people that are going through that, then like you'll never know like how happy or how enjoyable, or if they're even following, you know, the stress measures, the food, the training and all that. So that's really something that hits home for me, because it's like something like that. It's like, man, there's so much going on and you never know with different people that it's going to, you know, what's going to come out of that situation. I do love how you said, you know, you mentioned about like the information, the knowledge, surrounding yourself with that all the time. I know there's some people that actually have like subscriptions, like when Alan Argon kind of has his monthly subscription, you know, things like that. Now, is there something specific, like you kind of like, you know, besides like textbooks and all that, is there something like a regimen that you follow, like when it comes to like the information, when it comes to the physique world, the training, the coaching and all that? Is there something like you're subscribed to, something that you kind of, you know, elaborate a little bit more on and give us a little bit more information on how you keep up to date?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's funny because I think this is why running the podcast is so good, because, and it very rarely feels like a job, because it requires me to know what's happening like on social media in our field, because stuff comes out in social media where people have really good discussions. And maybe it's someone like Coach Kassem from N1, and he's doing some freaky exercises for his lats, and I'm like, hey, what is this? And like, that's not going to come out in the research, but people are doing it, and there's thousands of people across the world doing these variations. Hey, that's something to kind of keep on top of, because that, again, in the field experience, that practical experience is something that's useful as a coach. So I keep my eye on social media and the discussions and chats that are happening on there. Also now, because there's so many researchers on social media, like as soon as an interesting bit of research gets published, it's out there before it gets digested and reviewed in any of the research reviews. So I like to stay on top of that too. And then a lot of the time it's open access. So I have like researchers I'm following on Instagram that I'm like basically just making sure I keep up to date and see everything they're doing. Brad Schoenfeld is a great person to be following just in general, because he's like the hypertrophy god in terms of the amount of research he's kind of published, and also with his students now in his lab, he's always sharing their pieces as well. So if you keep up with some of the experts and the researchers within the field, you're going to be staying on top of those, and they do a damn good job of sharing that, often open access, but also giving their perspective on it too. Because as much as I like to read the research, I realize I'm not a researcher. It's kind of not my skill set as much as a practitioner that I am. So I prefer to talk to them, get their viewpoint on the research versus giving my 2 cents too much. I definitely let it kind of go out in the world, see what all the experts are saying about it before I really like give my strong opinion on it, because I just know where my skill set is. I know applying it to people and using that experience along with that new knowledge that I'm gaining from that research. And then in addition to like the social media, obviously you can keep up with podcasts. So obviously the Revive Stronger podcast, I'm going to be bringing on these kind of researchers to talk about these sort of things. But also like Eric Helms, you brought up earlier from 3DMJ, have their own podcasts. So they have like their podcast you can listen to, Stronger by Science with Greg Nuckols. He has his podcast out there. And what's it called? Iron Culture with Omar Isuf and Eric Helms as well. Man, we have just so much out there. And then there's people who aren't necessarily researchers or like deeply entrenched in the evidence-based scene, who I like to just keep tabs on, because again, these guys, like, they have their foot maybe in a little bit of the science, but also they have tons of practical experience, and I never want to remove myself from that. So I try and see if anything is happening in that kind of arena as well. So doing that. And then in terms of like a subscription that I have, it is the Mass Research Review is the main one that I keep up to date with. They do a fantastic job of like just having all the information there and available. And I can't say that there's almost too much. I mean, there isn't, because they do it every month and they have like a number of articles, and like you can get through that. But with everything I'm doing with the podcast and like just working with clients, I don't listen to every single one or read every single article. But every month I check in there and I'm like, hey, what of these are of a prime interest? Let's stay on top of that. I was just listening to their one on training to failure and reps in reserve based off the new meta regression that came out. So yeah, kind of getting that is really, really handy just to kind of keep yourself up to date with everything. I would say they're the main sources of information. And of course, if I ever need to, like, I have textbooks where if I need to, like, I don't know, I've got a bit of a social media post or a client has asked me a specific question. These are things that I can just pick up off the shelf and be like, hey, I actually want like a really good answer here. Let's find that for them. Or even examine.com. I don't know if you guys are aware of that website, but that's like gold mine. Like for supplements, there's so much to know. It's like how you could never know it all.
when my friends will like send me something, like, you know, they'll just like, someone sent me like about electrolyte powder with like collagen added into it. He put in his water. He goes, "This is absolutely disgusting." And I'm like, well, do your research on like something like collagen first. Like obviously like the electrolytes thing, but like, you know, most of the time like animal flesh and all that has bodies of collagen that's already in your diet, your daily regimen when it comes to eating. But that's funny because I use examine.com like almost every other day. So
yeah, it's so helpful just to have that available. So I'm blessed in a position now with the podcast reach and everything we have that I'm affiliates with lots of these things. So I actually have access to more than I can like digest. Like it's awesome. But yeah, it's like again, examine.com, even the free information they have, you don't have to necessarily subscribe to it, is just like a gold mine.
Piggybacking off that a little bit, how do you advise and guide clients when there's like such a cacophony of different like information research out there? Oftentimes the way I find that the maybe like mainstream media, and maybe it's just because they don't have experts on staff, but they might put out like hit new study says, you know, do this stability drill for you know, getting maximum like gains in your arms or something along those lines, for like, you know, do this stability squat drill or something along those lines. How do you guide clients when it comes to both like their fitness, periodizing their workouts, but also on the nutrition side of things? Because from what Antoine and I have observed, and this was one of the like the reasons why we wanted to start the podcast, is we did see that there's like quite a bit of confusion out there, and we took our collective knowledge and put it together and try to share that with our audience every week.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's, as I mentioned, social media is great because like you have researchers on there sharing information like for free, and it's just like, well, we didn't have that, I don't know, over a decade ago. That just wasn't available. And so there's so much information, and unfortunately with as just as much as there's really good information out there, is terrible information out there as well. And thankfully I've got myself to probably a clientele that's niched enough that they reach out to me and I already know they're a certain person. They're a person that if I went on their Instagram, they're following Mike Israetel, Eric Helms, Mena Henselmans, Brad Schoenfeld. Like they're following all the people that I would also be following, and they're digesting that content, and they've already got like a really good bullshit detector of like, hey, if something sounds too good to be true, it's fucking bullshit. And like they already are very good at differentiating between those. They still get confused too though, because even within that space, the little nuances of different opinions on things can really like cause havoc in people who really care about optimizing their results, and they want to make sure they're doing the best thing possible. So sometimes it's just reminding them that like, hey, there are some big principles that we need to achieve. The methods about how we go down the route of achieving those principles, they can differ quite greatly. And that's why you're seeing these different opinions of, I don't know, you have to train to failure, or you don't need to train there, or I don't know, whatever it might be. Nutritionally, I think, at least within like the evidence-based space, tends to be a little bit more settled. But you have like the guys out there with millions of followers who are just recommending, I don't know, to completely cut out sweeteners. That was the recent thing, right, with aspartame that came out. It's like, oh no, it's causing cancer. It's like, hey, I thought about a decade ago that was this, like the thing about the rats, like, and how it doesn't really equate to humans. And so that can be kind of like something to be aware of, and just like have that bullshit detector. If someone's talking about tons of like chemicals and using words that are just going over your head, if someone can't talk to you simply about what they're trying to say, they don't probably understand it as well as they should. Someone I think I haven't mentioned yet, Lane Norton. Do you guys follow Lane?
Yeah.
Like unbelievable at just like calling out anyone who's just promoting complete garbage, like especially the nutritional stuff. He's just doing God's work, because yeah, without him, I think a lot of people would like just start trusting these people, because if you speak with enough confidence and you talk in a way that makes you sound like you sound very intelligent, and maybe with words that again go over the individual's head, and you only need to know a little bit more than someone else to sound far more intelligent, then it's very easy to get duped. So I think the thing to do is to ask, like if you ask like, hey, I don't know if this person's like talking rubbish, or that they truly know what they're talking about, just making sure to like, if you put a comment there and you ask them a question and maybe challenge them, do they block you? Do they just ignore it, or do they answer your question in like a really helpful way? And like that can tell you quite a lot, because there'll be a lot of people that will just block these individuals immediately because they're uncomfortable. They don't have a good answer for you. And again, if they don't come back to you with, I don't know, they send you like a YouTube link or like just a link to a blog, you're like, hey, like this is, I would like some research, like maybe on humans. That would be pretty helpful. And but it's challenging, because like again, smart individuals will cherry pick data to support their argument, and you can find data to almost support any argument. But the thing to look at is the collective evidence. It is not just one study. And so I think trying to find trusted individuals is the best way to go. That's the thing I found has helped the most, is like finding a few people who I'm like, hey, these are legit individuals who don't talk out of turn. They also update their beliefs based on new science. Lane is someone who did that with like, I don't know, BCAAs and reverse dieting were two things he was pretty hot on at a time. And now he's changed his beliefs based off updated evidence. And to people like that, like they have so much just humility that you kind of not trust them blindly. I would never trust anyone blindly, which is important too. Always stay skeptical, but like if someone's saying something and it's like, hey, yeah, that kind of aligns with what I thought, great. But if it's completely against it, then you're already going to be like a bit wary of kind of, are they talking truth? Hopefully that made sense. I don't know if that answered it sufficiently.
Yeah, no,
it
sure.
it definitely makes sense, because like even what I'm seeing too is a lot of, like you were saying, like the collective data and the overall evidence would probably point out the correct answer for most things. But the insane amounts of access, like you were saying, to these people that do research all the time is, like you were saying, they're finding research for just their point and not really looking at the collective information. And I feel like we're at a point with social media too, where it's like, it's getting so information overload with like experts and actual experts, right? And then you would just be like, wow, this none of this makes sense. I'm just gonna go lift some weights, like I'm just gonna go eat something. Real quickly, because I know you posted it on Threads just recently about like your clientele and how you cater your information out to social media. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, that makes me ask you about like your clientele and whatnot. Are you most of the time getting those physique athletes that are more, seasoned in the practice? Are you getting new clients? I know you said most of them been lifting quite a bit. So can you talk about like your clientele, and like also maybe if you are accepting clients as well, like what you're looking for, to them, because we want to make sure we get a good, an ask out of you when it comes to clients itself and how you coach and who you coach.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point to bring up at this time, because it can be confusing. Even at times I catch myself where I'm like following someone and I'm like, hey, have they got a point? Like, should I take that on board? And then I look at, and then I reframe it and I'm like, hey, they're talking to like, I don't know, people who have eating disorders or something like this, that's their audience. Whereas I'm talking to someone who wants to like, or they're talking to like more gen pop individuals who aren't about trying to maximize their results. They just want to get fitter and healthier. It's like someone who's talking to that individual is going to approach the way they discuss topics and ideas far differently to how I would, because I'm in this like more extreme position where I'm like, hey, they might say, hey, it doesn't matter if nutrient timing is not that important. Whereas I would be like, guys, it is really quite important for us who are trying to maximize results and we're more advanced. So, and equally, if someone's like, they just wanted to feel fitter and healthier about things, tracking their macros might not be the answer. Actually might make them more stressed and anxious. But again, for us, that probably is the way to go, because it's going to be more precise and it's going to allow us to track variables and get to those results quicker. So as a consumer of content, it's also really important to know who's that individual talking to. And so for me, when I'm talking to people, it's like you mentioned there, I'm talking to normally either coaches themselves or physique competitors who are trying to maximize results under their circumstances and take this very seriously to the point where it's not just like a thing they do on the side, and they're not just trying to get kind of fitter, healthier and happier. They are doing it to the point where, hey, it may even make them unhappy at times, but if that means more muscle gain in the long run, they're like, that in the long run makes them happier, if you know what I mean. So they're kind of happy to sacrifice, if we can call it even sacrifice, to us or to those individuals. I'd hope it wouldn't be a sacrifice, it would be a cost that is worth the benefit on the other side, where I would be more on top of, for example, nutrient timing or something like sleep. That's something I'd be really big on with them. Obviously, everything at the extreme is also important to the people who have less extreme goals. It just matters much less to them, and they can focus on like the big rocks. So yeah, the type of person that we're seeking to look with at Revive Stronger is mostly just people who take this seriously, who, if they have a weekly check-in, they're going to have stuff to say to us, and that could be that things didn't go well, but they're committed to the process of trying to kind of gain the muscle that they want to, lose the fat that they want to. They don't have to be a physique competitor or anything like that. They just have to really be like in love with the process and willing to put in time and effort and work and be patient. I think those are they're more traits than like a specific person that I'm looking for. And the other thing I would say is we wouldn't be the best individuals to be working with if you are like a very new person to lifting, or like you don't know what protein is, for example. You basically, you kind of know, but you've never tracked it. You don't know how much you're eating on a daily basis. We're not the best coaches for that. There'd be better coaches for you who can help you with, like, we want to work with people who have already good fundamental basics and of understanding of training technique. They have a training split. They're already very consistent. Same with nutrition, but they want to, maybe they're early intermediate, maybe they're near advanced, and they want to get that level up. Like, what do they need to do to now see that next level of results, where they maybe feel a bit lost, confused. They need maybe some of those further principles past just like, hey, let's train hard consistently, try and beat last week's performance. Maybe there's some elements of fatigue management, periodization, more clever programming, and a lot of people just need to be more consistent with their nutrition. Nutrition can be fairly basic.
That's awesome. I love that so much. So I know you work with a number of great other like members on the Revive Stronger team. Pascal Flor, for example. Have there ever been any times where you've had like conflict with like members of your team? How do you work through that conflict? And then same goes for like conflicts with clients. It doesn't have to be like anything like we had this major blowout, but you know, Pascal saw like this one situation with like one of your mutual clients one way, and then you saw it a different way. How do you kind of come to like resolve that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thankfully, we haven't had any major blowouts, and there hasn't been any major conflict. We're actually really different personalities, me and Pascal, but we think about things very similarly. We just approach them entirely differently. So I'm much more emotional, he's much more rational and like direct, whereas I'm like much more of a soft touch. So we end up balancing each other quite well, and that's why I think we make good business partners. But sometimes we'll view things slightly differently, and so it's just knowing. I think the most important thing in that relationship, and it's the same with clients actually, is knowing how to communicate and also understanding how the other person communicates. So as an example, I know Pascal's a little bit abrupt with the way that he might communicate something to me, and so rather than taking it personally, I'm like, hey, I just know that's how Pascal just goes about things, and so I kind of take it that way. And just kind of having respect for one another is always helpful. And just having, I forget what it's called, when you think they've maybe done something wrong or bad, giving them a second chance, never just automatically thinking the worst, always thinking the best in those sort of situations. And we also work we work together, but mostly solo. So we have a lot of autonomy between us. And so it just allows us not to get in each other's way. We have our individual roles and responsibilities. And I think when there has been conflict, it's like, hey, isn't that your job? And he's like, isn't that your job? And I'm like, oh, we haven't actually like told one another who should be doing this thing. So now we have clear roles within the business. So it just makes life so much less stressful. And yeah, that just takes time to realize as you're going through things, something crops up and then you're like, oh, this needs to be taken care of. Whose job is that? And then just making sure a person has that. So I'd say that's most of it kind of within the business in that regard. And then with the coaches, it's mostly just about having clear expectations of like how many clients can they expect to be working with, kind of also just having that communication channel for them to be able to, like, if they have concerns or problems, to bring it up with us rather than just like hold it to themselves and let it build up and then suddenly they're like, hey, fuck you guys. It's like, hey, no, like, you've got our WhatsApp, you can reach out anytime, we can have like a live chat like this. Again, I think communication is just the absolute key there. And then with clients, again, I think the thing I do well is really setting clear expectations from the front. I can say like barely any conflict. I can't really think of any examples of the last few years. When I started, there might have been a few bits of like conflict, if you can put it that way. And that was mostly because I was communicating via email, and you just can't build rapport with someone the same way as what you can when you have a consultation with them, have a chat live like this, and then you have those weekly check-in points via video. You start really building an understanding of that person. And then, like, if there was ever to be conflict, the biggest conflict I get is like, hey, your check-in was late, and they're like, sorry, Steve, like, get to it when you can. And like I allow them that. Sometimes I'll still get back to them because I will always do that unless I, for whatever reason, absolutely can't. And same on my end, sometimes it might happen, and I hate that this happens, but I'm going to say it because I think every coach probably has it at some point. Like, they'll be due a program, like a new mesocycle, for example, and I'm like, fuck, I forgot it. Like, they email me being like, Steve, is that going to be live tomorrow? I'm like, crap. It literally happened to me just this weekend. I was at my parents'. I was like, dude, if I was at home, I'd be at my like computer and I'd create it for you. I don't know how that slipped through, like, because I normally I'm clear on when someone needs a program and I'm ahead of schedule. For whatever reason, we're human, these things happen. And he was just like, totally cool, like threw me a few questions like, shall I repeat this, blah blah blah. And I was like, yeah, that sounds perfect. Next day you'll have a mesocycle live. He was like, totally fine, enjoy your time with family. So when you have that relationship built with your clients and you have that rapport and respect for one another, I think it's hard to like piss one another off too much. So I think, yeah, having those clear guidelines from the get-go, and then having a good communication channel that both of you use well, having that kind of mutual respect, then you kind of allow one another, if there is like a little bit that goes like, I don't know, again, really all they can do wrong is check in late, or maybe a payment's declined and they're like, Steve, I'll pay in a few days. Like, for clients who I have a respect for and trust, like, that's fine. And then on my end, it's the same for them. If, like, I don't know, an email I meant to send them like their check-in, and they message me and be like, Steve, did you forget my check-in? I'm like, oh no, it's in my drafts. I don't know if you've ever had that where it's just like waiting in your draft. You're like, how did that happen? So yeah, I think once you build that rapport and respect, like it's nothing too big ever really pops up, and it's so less stressful that way.
Nice, I love it. What are your goals for Revive Stronger? Like, I don't know if you create like a 5-year business plan or like a 10-year business plan. Like, what are your goals for?
Also too, Steve, add on to that if you remember, because it depends on if you remember or not, but also add the goals on, please, if you don't mind, of yourself when it comes to like the bodybuilding world, because you said your last competition was 2021, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you can, just after all the business side of things, please, like if you want to get into that, because I was like, it's like almost the same question. Let's just throw it in there.
For sure. Yeah, it's I smiled when you said a 5-year business plan, because I absolutely don't. I have nothing close, and it's actually kind of similar to the way I approach bodybuilding. It's almost like do my best work now, and I'll get the best result and outcome I could possibly hope for. I don't think that's always the best way to go. I do think having some structured ideas of where you want to go, particularly with your business, for your physique, not so much, but with your business, you probably do need that. And I would say we're at the point at Revive Stronger where for, I don't know, many years, it was a case of like building a good client roster and having a full roster like year round and not having to worry about drop-offs. Like you're in a strong, safe position as an online coach. And I would say we've nailed that for ourselves, myself and Pascal Floor. Like we're in a solid position where we don't have to worry if like 5 clients drop off like in 1 week, because for whatever reason it sometimes happens, because we're in a secure position and we have clients coming through the door like regularly to be able to fill those spots. And that's a great position to be in. And it's the next level is the hard part. I think as an online coach, that's like the first thing to like thumbs up. You've achieved like just like you're in a good position. And now it's like, where do you go from here? And I just recently interviewed Lane Norton, who obviously has been incredibly successful as an online coach and business person. And he has like his supplement line, he has ebooks, he has courses. Like, I don't know what he doesn't have. I was like speaking to him, I was like, oh, man, I have so much respect for you. You literally have done everything you could like do as an online coach. And so it's kind of looking into that, because we have tried other things. For example, we've had group coaching. Again, you can just coach more people in that manner. And again, that's a different way of giving people a cheaper way in to getting some kind of touch point with you and getting some coaching. But that neither of us loved. And also it just never really kind of got anywhere particularly far. And then we have a member site, which we launched. So to have like, I still do weekly vlogs in there. And we had like educators coming in and doing presentations. We had a forum. But again, that just never really flourished. And it's kind of a bit dead at the moment, to be honest. It's nothing that we particularly prioritize. Like, it's fine. After those things happened, we're just like, hey, the thing we're really good at is coaching. Maybe we just are happy just being coaches. I do want Revive Stronger to be something bigger than that. And I think the route that we're thinking to go down, if there is one, is the podcast. So it's seeing people like, again, like Joe Rogan's a good example, like unbelievable level, right? Imagine if I could get to that level. But looking at someone like Chris Williamson with, I've forgotten what his podcast called, like not Mind Over Matter, something. Do you know what it's called?
I don't, but I know his podcast. Yes.
Yeah.
I can't think of it myself.
But he, in the last years, just like exploded on the scene. And okay, he's done hundreds and hundreds of episodes. He's been like, you only see the tip of the iceberg, right? You don't see like the big bit below the surface. But yeah, seeing him do that and like as a career and being able to like interview some huge names in the industry, like he recently interviewed Chris Bumstead, which was just like awesome. I don't know if I even want to go down that route, but I think if there is a route to go down, it would be like, we have a very established podcast, a good listener base. We have some core guests that come on and we speak about subjects, and I think it's well done. It's whether that could be something more. But yeah, I don't know is like the real answer. I want to continue. The thing that I do enjoy most, and the same for Pascal, is having like very high quality clients. And the longer that I've been doing this, the better that clientele is generally, like on average. And that's just the feeling you get of satisfaction when, I don't know, a client does what they want to do at a show, like they bring the best physique of their life, or you help someone who has always had like a bad relationship with food and always been overweight, like be able to maintain that weight loss, or even someone who's like always been skinny and maybe even bullied for it, and then they're like able to gain 10 pounds of muscle and just like have better confidence than they've ever had. Like there's something just so rewarding about that. But it would be nice to be able to, I guess in some ways we do it with the podcast now and reaching more people through that platform and be able to help more people. But I guess in a cheesy way, it's like leaving your mark in some way on the industry would be nice. So yeah, I don't have a great answer for you there, but yeah, we're trying things, we're still growing, and yeah, we just have to see what the future holds. I can't say we've got a particular business plan in mind. Maybe that's something for us to look into, some mentorship or something, but there's a lot of business mentorships now.
Now on the coaching side, now this might be a stretch for that question. Now, because you're a seasoned coach and you could probably take on like a higher like clientele person, maybe such as like someone like Layne Norton, right? Now, is there a goal to like coach someone like Layne Norton, or maybe even like, I don't know, any person that you kind of would look forward to coaching? Like, is there someone or some people that you would like to, bring on as a, client to kind of just grow your knowledge? And also, someone's like so seasoned in the bodybuilding world, like that'd be so awesome to like be a part of, right? So.
Yeah, it's a good question. When you ask it, I feel like for the person who does want a particular person to coach, there's someone that maybe comes to mind for them where they're like, I'd love to get my teeth sunk into that individual. That sounded really
like maybe like Alberto Nunez or like Eric
sure.
Helms, Jeff Nippard, someone. I'm just curious because I'm like, man, maybe Steve has someone like he's like, damn, I wish I could coach that person.
And when you like, and as I was saying that, I don't really have anyone that comes to mind. Some of the clients that I've enjoyed coaching the most, it's just generally those who are so invested into the process. Like if they love the process, like I've had recently someone he needed to leave for financial reasons, and I'm sure like coaches have had that the same. And when it's someone who's that invested in the process, they want to stay on, you want them to stay on. Like it's just, I don't know, I've cried when some clients have left because it's just like an emotional thing where you've got a really, really good bond and connection with them. I don't really have like, ambitions to, I guess people would have ambitions to coach people to like their natural pro card or something like that. But if I can just make substantial changes to someone's life and make them have a better overall quality of life and reach their goals in a way and really develop great relationships, that's what I enjoy about it, is building those great relationships with people. So yeah, I can't say there's a particular person that
I know. I mean, I'm just curious, not to say like, that answer wasn't a bad answer. I was just curious, but I think I like that answer even more. I think the reason why you got into it, kind of like we got into the podcast, is like you were saying, like get them to that goal, get them to that pro card, get their life just feeling like you can serve them, where their life gets just a little bit better, where they don't even have to worry about the lifting per se, or like the nutrition, or some of the like tips you would give them on posing and whatnot. So I like the answer either way, because it's such a great answer, especially coming from someone like you. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think you nailed it, where you just know you've had you've just improved their life like substantially. And sometimes you don't even realize how much just by being there. A lot of us don't have someone in their corner to be able to talk through some of the worries and concerns we have. Like, not that we're like a what's it called, a psychotherapist or anything like that. We're not a counselor for them, but to be able to talk about their nutrition training on a high level, they might not have friends or family that want to talk about that sort of stuff, and it could be a real concern for them. And to just remove that from their life and to give them confidence in that area, to give them direction and motivation, like I think that can be like hugely appreciated and valuable. And when I can see that they value that, like it's so rewarding for me. Whereas yeah, a certain individual, yeah, it'd be pretty cool to have those things, but to me that doesn't matter as much as having individuals like that on my roster. I can answer my kind of personal goals if that
go ahead. Yeah,
cool. So yeah, I was kind of saying how this is not something like where I have a plan to again go pro or anything like that. I have timelines that I set in place to periodize, especially if I'm like have a competitive season in mind, and I do have one in mind. And I would love to be able to, again, beat my last performance. So for those that don't know, 2021, I managed to qualify for, my best achievement was WNBF Worlds, where I came second as an amateur in the middleweight division. So I didn't get an opportunity to try and go for a pro card or anything. And I would say when I started, I was not a great bodybuilder at all. I was very mediocre. I wasn't like winning shows at all. I think I came second last in my first show. I came, I think, fourth in my second show, and that was like novice classes. I'm not a great bodybuilder by any means, but every season I've done, I've been able to beat my previous performance. And I didn't have expectations to qualify for WNBF Worlds, let alone get like a second place in that lineup, which again, I'm hesitant to talk a lot about outcomes because there's so much out of my control. Like I can honestly say that second place at Worlds, if that was any other year, maybe I wouldn't have come second place. Maybe I would have come not even in the top 5 because maybe there would have been better competitors that came out on that day. You just don't have control over who turns up on the day. So I hope to do better, like on the like objective outcomes. I would hope I can do better than a second place at WNBF Worlds, maybe put in like a good show for a pro card or something. But honestly, the thing I want to do most is objectively look better as a bodybuilder, bring a better overall package, be more competitive. If I compare my 2024 look to my 2021 look, objectively be able to agree like, yeah, Steve is putting a good shift in his off season. He's gained some more muscle. He's brought out more condition. His posing is better. He's a better bodybuilder. Doesn't matter where my placings are in that, because I have no control over that. You could just have a wild season where every best amateur comes out and I'm like, fuck you guys.
Yeah, I had a quick question about that then, because you're talking about like your transformation. So to give like some statistics, obviously, with like the physique and the bodybuilding competitions, you kind of want to come in with like a, in the natural world, a little bit heavier weight, but, a little bit more muscle put on the body. Now, tell me, what's like your stats right now when it came to like 2014 competition, the 2021 competition? What's your height, and then like what was like the competing weights? I know you said you were middleweight, but what was like the weight you came in 2014 and then what you came in 2021?
For sure. So yeah, I'm 5'10", so like bang average in terms of height. 6 foot in my squat shoes, so it's all good. And I was how much was I on stage? So my stage weight was around 165 pounds in
oh wow,
2014.
I think you were, so when I compete, I'm 6'2", and when I competed in 2016, I was about 164, 165.
Okay.
So when I competed, and then my next show, I actually got down a little bit lower. I think it was like 161 to 162. So that's crazy. But, obviously to Steve's point, he probably had a little bit more muscle than I did because, the height and the weight difference and whatnot. So I was a very small person at 6'2".
I guess you was that early within your bodybuilding career competing then?
Yeah, so it was my first ever show, and I was 21 at the time. And then, like, my serious lifting started when I was like probably like 17, 18 years old. So I was like 3-ish years into like lifting seriously, but nowhere near to like what it is now. It's like it doesn't even touch like what the dedication is compared to now. And I'm 29 years old right now. So
yeah, I was 24 when I first competed, and yeah, I had a good number of years under my belt. But to be honest, I think I have experience with people in your situation where you'd look at their body weight and their height and you'd be like, hey, you're going to be like just skin and bone on stage. But actually, because of their structure, they really hold it well. Like that muscle just holds their physique and they flow really well. Whereas for me, I didn't look like I might have been a reasonable weight, but my structure, like a big bone structure, like I didn't hold that particularly well. My symmetry is like the thing that holds me back all the time, unfortunately. But yeah, so anyway, I was 165 pounds 2014 on stage, and my heaviest stage weight, so I'll use that one, in 2021 was 175 pounds. So I managed to kind of gain 10 pounds. But even between that 2017, I stepped on stage, I was 165 pounds again. So I didn't gain anything between 2014 2017. I mean, I did, but not on like via that metric. I was leaner. I certainly improved my outcomes, but really my best progress came 2017 to 2021, where I actually managed to probably gain legitimately 10 pounds of muscle, which you wouldn't expect to gain better later in your bodybuilding career, but it sometimes happens that way.
I love it. Yeah, it sounds really reasonable. And yeah, like it's for me, I haven't stepped on stage since October 2016. Yeah, so my wife and I, she tells me I can't step on stage again until we're done after having kids. Obviously, in the natural world and whatnot, you'd understand in the bodybuilding scene. So, but we just had our first kid in February. So maybe down the line. Thank you. But I'm still dedicated to the game, and definitely it was the most fun time. And I did a powerlifting show too, but the bodybuilding show was insane. But yeah, that's really good. The only one thing I want to ask you too is when I first competed, I did an NPC show in the States, and to my understanding, it was a natural federation, all that good stuff. Now in 2014, and I remember when I got there, like I was blown away because of the fact that everyone was just so much bigger than me. I mean, we had 5'7" guys that were 210 pounds, and I was 165 at 6'2", and I mean, I loved everything. I loved the grind. I loved the show. I loved everything about it. Now, did you have like a similar experience, or did you do a little bit more of a deep dive of like the federations and how they're ran and the competition was like and whatnot?
So yeah, I don't know how I did this really. I think I just Googled like because the reason I wanted to compete, if I kind of flash back to that, was I found Matt Ogus, who you guys hopefully know. Yeah, you do. Cool. So he was like the OG. Sure. Yeah, the OG for me, and I loved his stuff. And he moved me across to 3DMJ because he was being coached by Eric Helms. And so I knew of natural bodybuilding, and that's what I wanted to do. So I was like, hey, so I didn't even really know of the enhanced side particularly. Like I like a lot of people get into natural bodybuilding through the enhanced bodybuilding because that's the bigger scene, right? But I got through it like from following Matt and then finding natural bodybuilding. So I've never really been particularly big on the enhanced scene, and it just doesn't interest me particularly. I mean, now it does more because like it's just you can't avoid it now, especially like where I am in the industry. So it does interest me to some extent, but competing then never did. So yeah, I was searching for natural federations within the UK. So thankfully, I wasn't against like mass monsters at all. I was against like people on a level playing field, and like to the point where I was competing in novice shows because it was my first season, so I was allowed to do that. And yeah, so thankfully that meant that I wasn't against like the biggest guys ever. But in the same instance, I was still fairly absolutely clueless to the process. I didn't know how much it was going to take out from me. Like I just was super fatigued all the time, and my cardio had to get really high because at the time step tracking wasn't popular. So my steps probably were super low because I was just being super lazy all the time, because I just like, I don't know, it wasn't even something I was thinking about non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So to keep my energy expenditure up, we had to really push my cardio high. And it wasn't great timing because that was when I got in a relationship with my girlfriend. Thankfully, she almost left me that season. But like, I didn't know that I was just going to be disinterested in her completely, have like no mental like space for anything else but just bodybuilding. So yeah, it was a tricky time. And I still remember the first time I competed, I didn't shave my armpits as an example, like of how clueless I was. I just had, some people still have like a little bit of hair there, but yeah, I remember being marked down for that. And I was like, oh, that's so weird, but I get it.
Yeah, I remember I had my brother and now sister-in-law try to shave where like I couldn't reach like places and whatnot, and I'm pretty sure it was like the most horrendous spot. Like I tried doing the self-tanning with them too, and my mother was like, "We're just gonna pay for the professional service. Like, go ahead." And then they gave you the good old sock and then the spray, and it was so much better than what we were doing in the hotel bathroom. And also Steve probably knows about the sock and the spray joke.
Yes, yeah. The funny thing I don't know why I found this hilarious, but me and Pascal competed together his first season, his only show actually, 2021, the WWF UK, and he was like, he just came out. He was like, I don't need the fucking sock, and he just came out completely naked, and the like spray tanner was just like, I was like, Pascal, you need the sock, come on.
That is German. Hilarious.
I don't care about these things. I'm married, like whatever.
That's awesome. You discount yourself though, Steve. You look phenomenal in the 2021 show. Having like followed you since 2017, like your shoulders have totally blown up. You have like a really respectable chest, and like your arms, like especially for a natural guy, like your arms are pretty insane. So yeah, like make sure that you like give yourself your flowers where you deserve
That's
them.
why he's wearing. That's why
I
he wears
appreciate that.
sleeveless shirts as much as possible.
I do wear them a lot. One, I always run hot. I use that excuse. But two, I mean, thank you for the compliments. Shoulders for sure. Like I feel like I've worked for shoulders. I mean, I've worked for my arms to some extent. Like they weren't always as big as they are. But whenever someone compliments my arms, I'm just like, yeah. I mean, they're a genetic gift. And they're a great example of like if everything was as gifted as my arms, I would be like in a really good position here. But if someone compliments like I don't know my calves or my quads, I'm like, yes, they're muscle groups I really truly have to try for. Whereas biceps, like I do 4 sets a week. They just end up growing, but it's nice to be able to have them. The triceps I do actually have to really try for, but the bicep that's something I got from my dad. He doesn't have big arms, but you can see the insertions. It's like, yeah, you have a good bicep.
Nice, that's awesome. How do you are you? So it sounds like you work with a coach yourself for your own like personal like bodybuilding experience.
For my 2014 first prep, I did,
Okay.
and
Okay.
that actually, I wasn't really online coaching when I first went through that. That year was the year I got into online coaching, and part in due because I understood a bit about the process behind how he did it. He was doing email check-ins, which I found out was not for me, so I moved away from that.
Are you
And I
talking
think
about? Did you coach with 3DMJ, or did you have them? Or
no, it wasn't. His name was
Oh.
Greg Farris from MyoBrain. I believe he still is in the industry, but I think he moved towards CrossFit and kind of went into a different space. So not someone who I kind of keep tabs on anymore. And he was a good coach. Like we did the job we could at the time with the information we had available. I would do things differently now, but he would probably do things differently too. And I will always be thankful because again, that gave me insights into like how could I run an online coaching business, like in terms of like spreadsheets and how to set all that up. So just like expedited that process, which was great. But 2017 and 2021, I haven't had coaches, but I have had people I've been consulting with. So 2017, I was consulting with, I don't know if you guys have heard of Broderick Chavez.
Yeah.
So he's been on the podcast a few times. He distinctly hates naturals. I think he would actually say he hates them. I don't think he hates them. Does not find natural bodybuilding interesting. So he's not super interested in coming on the podcast anymore, which is fair enough. He has his own enhanced side, but I did do some like peak weeks with him and consulted with him a little bit, which I don't know why that ended up being that way. Because obviously he's enhanced and I'm natural, and I don't know how that ended up, but he was actually a very good coach, like in terms of emotional support and stuff, and like understanding how someone ticks. Like he definitely understands that. And I also consulted with Jared Feather a little bit in that season, but I didn't have anyone like formally coaching me through the process. And then in 2021, it was similar in that, but I had Brett Freeman, who is I think bantamweight WNBF, like he won the whole thing and incredible competitor, like unbelievably like shredded and everything. And yeah, so I was kind of communicating with him in peak weeks and just like kind of getting someone to be like thumbs up or thumbs down to my process. In this next season, I am strongly considering actually having a coach, because it's like I'm dipping my feet in the water of having a coach. And I'm just like, why don't I just get the full benefits of having someone who can just be like, Steve, do this? Because I think I'd love that rather than having to think about it myself. Like, yeah, I always hear my clients being like, oh, it's so great just to have someone like take over that process for me. And I'm like, yeah, I think I need to let go in prep and just let someone do it. So yeah, I think I might this season, or the next season I do.
Yeah, but I feel like you kind of mentioned already, but you have to kind of go through the trenches too to be able to accept that, right? Like you have to. I think you, like when you were saying like I had this person for peak week and some guidance here and there. I mean, to a point, like since 2014, it's almost been 10 years that you've been kind of doing your own thing and kind of recording and making sure it's the best to your ability and trying to make things better, which you have, right? Which that's the goal. But to get to that next level, you want to kind of offload it, get those other opinions, and make sure it's kind of seamless, because it's to the point where you're at within your level, that guidance can kind of put you to that next level, right? Like where you want to be, which is the best bodybuilder you could be, right? So I think that's pretty awesome.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's something it's challenging because like a lot of coaches, you know what you're doing. And also like I'm very invested into my process where like I like to know if I did this, it's because I told myself to do this. And if I don't get the outcome I wanted, it's on me. But if someone else tells me to do something and it doesn't quite work out, like I would still blame myself, because I think like extreme ownership is important. I was the person that employed that individual in the first place. I trusted them. And actually, I think I would be very coachable, because I think just in life, like that's something I miss almost from being in like the corporate world. Having a manager, I used to actually quite like having a manager that told me what to do. I quite like that. My girlfriend is like the boss of the relationship. I quite like being told what to do sometimes. So I think actually as an athlete, I just need to not let my head try and guide decisions, and just offload it. So yeah, it's for some reason nerve-wracking to think about letting go, but I think like you said, sometimes I think the stress relief for me, because I am one of those people that gets a bit stressed like in prep and overthinks things, I think just the stress relief in its own will be like so good.
Part of management is having that relationship too. So like you're gonna have your own like internal self-management as well, but there's certain aspects like in the bodybuilding world, like with posing, for example, it's incredibly challenging to be objective of your own posing, especially with trying to have like direct feedback where you want to understand like when you're doing like a back double bicep and you're not like quite like internally rotate, or rather externally rotating like your glute enough to be able to like show it off in the most like, let's say, favorable position for you, to have like somebody that's like objective, and also that like that third party person that's saying like, oh no, I need you to be able to like extend your thoracic spine more, or something along those lines. Whatever the cue is, I can only imagine how challenging that would be trying to coach yourself, because you're essentially recording yourself for like a lot of your back shots, and then you're going back and watching and saying, I need to do this more, as opposed to having that direct in the moment feedback.
Yeah, I think for it's great bringing up posing actually. So in 2021, actually in 2017, I had a couple of consultation calls with Jeff Alberts from 3DMJ to help me with my posing. God bless the man, because it was like over an hour of like him helping me like pose, and the internet connection I had was awful. So I don't even know how much of me he could really see, but it definitely helped for sure. And then in 2021, Andrew Chappelle, who is the president of the WNBF UK, and Steph Noble, I did some posing with them, I think a couple of times, a couple of sessions, which was definitely helpful. But everyone has their own like little takes on posing, their little quirks that they like to see. They're like the same with, I guess, programming for training and nutrition. You have every coach has their kind of, obviously it's individualized, but they still have like the way they like to do it. So I've seen that from posing. And I think truly, once you have those kind of basics down, so much is reliant upon the individual. I always say it like when my clients, do a posing update and I share it on my story, I'm like, they're doing their homework, because it's homework. Yeah, like there's nothing that can beat consistently like looking at your posing and like assessing it. But it's really tiring. It's not a skill set of mine for sure, and that's something I know I need to work on for next year, because if you are a fantastic poser, that can make up placings for sure, because not many people are fantastic posers on stage, even as pros.
Yeah, someone watching like kind of like Ed Corney, or like even like Arnold, or like Kai Green, it's just like you get lost. You get lost in like you're trying to focus on like how good they look in the lighting, their muscle bellies and whatnot, and how hydrated they are and all that. And then you just like, it's just like watching a movie. Like, it's like, how the heck do you follow? Like as even like someone that judges that, it's like, if you were able to get a routine down for posing like that, they'd probably be so, like you were saying, you'd probably place a little bit higher, because the fact that they're just so mesmerized of like the scene they just watched. So
yeah, the posing routines are interesting. It depends on the federation. I don't think many tend to like score it and count it to your overall score. Normally you've got your placing, but if you have it, I judged at the WMF UK a few weeks ago, and I had people joint on my scorecard because like some do well in symmetry, some do well in muscularity, and some do well in both. And so I'm like, hey, if someone like screws up their posing routine or nails it, that could give them the edge. And yeah, if you have like a Terrence Ruffin style posing routine or like the Ed Corney, like you said, like that could just blow your socks off. But even just knowing how, and you mentioned this, Roman, with how to present yourself, because everyone's a little bit built a bit differently. And I know for me, I think I now have worked out how to hit my front double bicep as an example. It's like a unique pose to me where I have to twist my hips and do this position. You don't see many people hitting it like that, but I found that pose for me. Whereas like if I hit it front on, like my goal was always to just be able to hit it front on, because I'm like, if you can hit shots just front on to judges, you don't have to twist your hips. Like you are a fucking good bodybuilder because you're just built with a tiny waist and wide shoulders and the sweeping lats and quads. But I can't do that because I have not got those gifts. But I can maybe make my front double bicep look just as good as someone who can do that, because I can contort my poses in a way that shows everything off. And that's like the art of bodybuilding, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can kind of like show off like more of like the swooping angle of like the lats, and then like sometimes the asymmetry, like where you have like one elbow. I think the way you do it, you have one elbow that's like slightly above the other. And yeah, when you do that, it creates like, as long as you feel that and you find like speaking to other people, like getting like objective opinions that creates flow, then yeah, again, it's like it's what works for your body, like your like muscle belly insertions, like all those kinds of things. So that's the thing about bodybuilding that still like keeps me like wanting to consume more and more content like day in and day out, is like that artful part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's even, again, as a judge, this as a competitor, but it's really brought to your face as a judge. Like if someone's hitting a shot, when you're looking at your posing, you're hitting it front on and you're viewing it in your camera front on, but a judge might be looking at you completely to the side. So it might look great front on, but from the side, it might look pretty janky. So at least if the judges are doing their job and the head judge is doing their job, he should move you around so you are trying to look at the people in front of you. You shouldn't have to look over there so much. But yeah, it's all those considerations, right? It's even to the point of the judges aren't where your camera is right in front of you, maybe they're down below you. So you can't pose for the crowd necessarily. You have to pose for the people below you. That might even change how you hit some poses.
Yeah, definitely.
I love it. Was that your first judging, Steve, or is that how many times have you judged?
That's the third time. So okay. I did the 2 WNBF UKs last year, and then I'll do the 2 this year as well. Andy is trying to build me up. I don't know. I think he's trying to find someone to be head judge. Like he is. That's
pretty dope. Do you like that aspect of bodybuilding too, or?
Oh, it's super interesting. I really appreciate seeing it because it's given me an insight I wouldn't have had as just a competitor. It's given me a new lens to look through things. I don't know how much I like it because I really like objectivity and like all those aspects. And as a judge, you be as objective as you can to the criteria, but there are subjectivities that come in. And also the thing that I found very confronting was the fact that you only score like a top 7, but really your top 5 is the one that you're really like deadly focused on. And because they're the best, right? They're the ones that matter the most where they're placing, and they have the most to win and like lose. But if there's a class of 20 up there, they're all then 7s on your scorecard. And as harsh as it sounds as a judge, you need to get your 7s out of the way so you can focus on the best that are on stage. And I've been a 7. And so I don't like that feeling, because I know what everyone has just as much right to be judged and be up there as anyone else. And I think it's great that the WNBF, they do a good job of bringing everyone up and posing there. But I know as a judge, my attention is on the best people there, and it has to be like that's like it's a sport. It's like this is life, right? There are winners and losers, but it's quite confronting because I know the effort that goes in by every individual, but it's not an effort contest either. It's not a weight loss contest. It is who is the best bodybuilder on the day. So yeah, it's super interesting. I absolutely enjoy it. Just it forces me also to go to shows, which I like, and I think makes me a better coach and competitor.
Yeah, I asked too because the fact that I only think that could help your career out too, because the fact that if you, it's not like it's insider information, but it's like one of those things is like some people don't even, I remember like when I first did my 2 shows, like no one would even like talk to the judges. No, even if they placed like second or third, they'd be like, they wouldn't even talk to the judges or even be a part of that routine. So it's like, well, if you did talk to them, which they're human beings, right? You know, they'll talk to you as long as they're not busy or not doing something else afterwards. Or or you're in that position where you're part of that as well. So it's like, you that's just gonna hopefully help your game just a little bit better and put you ahead of some people, because the fact that you're just putting yourself in that world, right? Which is like you're saying, like it's forcing me to go to shows as much as you said that, but it's in reality helping you out more in your own career as well. So.
And you're so right, because even if you go to a show, you don't watch every class. You don't judge like you're not focused on every class. I am picking up things that I never would have picked up before. So I know like what makes a good fit body, a good figure, a good bikini competitor, a good men's physique, like little things as well that you wouldn't pick up on, even if you go to a show and you're coaching someone, like you're focused on your client and everything. But I'm focused on every category, and I pick up on little things where I'm like, hey, like something I learned for men's bodybuilding, like people say shows are won from the back. And I'm like, bullshit. Like they're not. They're one from the front. Absolutely. Front relax, front double bicep. They're the most impactful poses for the judges, I would say. Obviously, once like you need to be amazing everywhere once you're a pro and once you're like trying to be in the top 5 and everything. But if you don't nail that front relaxed and you don't have a strong one, or same with front double bicep, like you can, especially the front relax, because that's first call outs is based off your quarter turns. So if you don't have strong quarter turns, you could get lost even if your muscularity is very good. So yeah, little insights like that is super great. And then also things like, I got insights into like the impact of, I've got a bunch of tattoos now. It certainly put me off getting tattoos in certain places because I see competitors up there and it's like, hey, that hides detail where you've got that. Or even things like if someone looks like they don't want to be there. Like we've had competitors who are just like, I don't know if they're just tired or what, but they just look like they're having the worst time of their life. And you're like, hey, that doesn't draw my eye or attention as a judge. Like it's a subjective thing, but it doesn't help. Or I can remember one class, some guy, he basically had boxer shorts on stage. I was like, this is a bodybuilding class. I can't see your glutes. He could have won that class, but he came second because he wasn't showing something that we needed to judge, which was his glute detail. I don't think his glutes were in like by any means, but still, it was like, dude, like,
Yeah.
know the judging criteria. And like now I know so well the judging criteria, and it also means that I'm gonna, if like I go to other competitions and federations, I'll look at their judging criteria very closely because it might be ever so different, and I'll understand those nuances better than I did in the past.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I was gonna say I have 4 tattoos myself, and then like for like the ability of like telling people if they want to be there or not. Yeah, it just it is, as a competitor as yourself, like you just kind of realize like, it just, I don't know if it's because it's their first show or they're just like maybe they just didn't put the work in and they're there and they're just kind of experiencing it. It's just like all falling in place right there. It's just a whole bunch of things. I remember I had a smile my whole time, even though I was probably in the worst like mental state, like worst physical state where you could just push me over. But I remember I was just like enjoying every second of it. And that's why I just love the industry in the world like that, because it just sticks with me. I mean, even to this day, I haven't competed since 2016, and it makes me itch where just like I love it. I still pay attention to it, and it's just an enjoying process. So.
Yeah, for sure. And that's part of, I view it as a real gift to be a judge, because if any competitor comes up to me, it doesn't matter if they're someone who is a 7 on my scorecard or someone who came first or second, they're all going to get the same attention and care from me as a competitor. And I'm going to give them the best advice I can to make them the best competitor they can be in future. And I know that that's not the case for like every judge. I think every judge at the WNBF would be like that at the UK, but I don't know as a whole for like every competition, it's that way. It's not always as friendly as that. And I just have so much love for the sport. And without the people who aren't like just the genetic elite or the people that are winning shows immediately, like they could win shows in future. They could have like a huge career ahead of them. And if they have a terrible experience at their show and the judge is rude to them or dismissive and doesn't really provide them feedback, like that could push people out of natural bodybuilding, of which is like a pretty niche small thing, and we need as many people in it as we can, and it needs to grow. And I think being a positive community is a big part of that.
I love it. Roman, did you want to go ahead and ask anything else, or did you want to?
No, that was amazing. No, I'm good, buddy.
Awesome, Steve. Let's just end with how can people reach you? What do you want them to look forward to? And then we can close this thing out, Steve, so we can get you back on your night.
Cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a fun chat, a bit of a different podcast, and I'm used to the one interviewing, so it's fun like answering these questions and thinking about things. Like you asked some questions and made me think about things that I haven't thought about before, and it's nice because it brings them to light in my head. But
we like to put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's good. I do it to all my guests. So if people want to find out more about like our coaching or the podcast, everything's at revivestronger.com. So they can find everything over there. I'm most present over on Revive Stronger on Instagram. You can find the rest of the coaching team and everything there as well. If people want to reach out, they can. And yeah, the only thing I think we have coming up is, if this is out in time, in September the 10th and 11th, if I've got the weekend right.
Is that the London event you're talking about?
Yes. So we have the guys from RP, Nick Shaw, Jared Feather, Mike Israel, joining myself and Pascal, and we're doing kind of workshops in a gym, private setting, putting people through their paces. So yeah, they know how to train for hypertrophy for sure. And I think we even have, I don't know if it will when this is released, but we'll certainly have, I think, just some general spots available where you can book in a session. But we might also have some masterclass spots left where they get like very individual time with us. Like there's only 5 of those spots available, and they get like very private time and to come out to dinner with us as well. So yeah, that should be fun. But that's the main thing, other than just like exciting podcasts in the books to come out.
Yeah, I actually I'll post it on there. This will be released in August, so definitely awesome. should be good enough time. And yeah, we appreciate your time, Steve. This is such an awesome session. Glad that you're our first international guest on. If you guys are listening, we're on all audio platforms and YouTube for the video session if you want to watch us and our beautiful faces, obviously. And then we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.